of the presentation. Even though, since the topic is rather technical, I try to simplify it as best as possible, and maybe during discussion we could elaborate. If this is the case, in what stages then, from the historical standpoint, can we refer to the Qur'an as to how it was preserved? Well, obviously, the first stage was during the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And the first thing we notice, and I'll come to that point again toward the end, is the widespread memorization of the Qur'an. In fact, multitudes of people memorized the entire Qur'an, multitudes memorized major parts of the Qur'an, and like I say, we'll come back to that again. There's no question about that. There are mutawatir information. Mutawatir means information that are coming consistently through a variety of sources or variety of chains of narration that support the fact that the Qur'an was preserved. Indeed, as the Qur'an itself says, fi sudur, in the heart of people. This might sound rather strange, especially for our Jewish and Christian friends who have never heard, I have never heard personally, of anyone throughout the entire human history who memorizes the Bible from A to Z, word for word. It doesn't exist. So that this is something that is rather amazing and unique about the Qur'an. The second point is that we find in numerous sound and authentic ahadith that it was the custom of Jibreel alayhi salam to come to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam every Ramadan during the last 10 days during his i'tikaf and reviews with him what has been revealed in the entire Qur'an up to that point of time. It was narrated also that in the last year of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the last Ramadan, his i'tikaf extended to the last 20 days of Ramadan, and Jibreel reviewed the Qur'an with him twice instead of once. And interestingly enough, and that's related to another point that's coming, you know who was with the Prophet ﷺ during these reviews? Was Zayd, the chief scribe of Revelation. So that settles that issue. Then we come to the question of the scribes. And in spite of the misunderstanding that some people given or superficial interpretation of some ahadith that might give the impression that there were only 4 or 7 scribes of Revelation, we find that both Muslim and even many non-Muslim scholars admit that you get lots of reports about scribes of Revelation, which includes in some cases as many as 40, in some cases as many as 52 names of people who wrote or were charged of writing revelation to the Prophet ﷺ. Secondly, we go to the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. And first of all, we ask, what was the occasion for Abu Bakr's contribution to the preservation of the Qur'an? If the entire Qur'an was memorized and committed to writing at the time of the Prophet, what exactly did Abu Bakr do? Here we must remember that while the entire Qur'an was written down, it was not all collected in one place or under the same roof. And in fact, memorization would have been sufficient. And you'll see that from the dialogue that went on between Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhuma. As you know, as soon as Abu Bakr became Khalifa, immediately there was that rebellion that some historians call Hurub al-Ridda, the apostasy wars. Whether we have reservation on the term itself or not, but we all know that there have been big commotions, and there have been some people who embraced Islam in a very superficial way, and with the death of the Prophet ﷺ, they just started to get loose, and the whole structure of the state and order was threatened. As a result, in one of those battles known as the Battle of Yamama, it was reported that 70 of the memorizers of the Qur'an were martyred. And by the way, that's a further evidence that memorization was not limited to a few. Just in one battle, 70 memorizers were martyred. And these are not all the memorizers. So Umar radiallahu anh went to Abu Bakr. And he said to him, I am afraid if that situation continues and more memorizers of the Quran get martyred, that sometimes down in the future, the Quran could get lost. Maybe he wasn't quite sure whether memory alone would be enough. It's just the great care they wanted to give to the preservation of the book of Allah. So Abu Bakr asked him, what do you want me to do then? Well, he said, you should collect all the manuscripts, verify it, and have it all under one roof, so that you have the whole volume of the Quran in one place. And Abu Bakr hesitates. And he tells Umar, why should we do something that the Prophet didn't do? But Umar, again, with his fiqh, his understanding and skill, tell him that yes, if the Prophet didn't do it, but there is something which is beneficial to Muslims. So he kept influencing Abu Bakr until Allah opened Abu Bakr's heart to this idea. Then Abu Bakr called no less than Zayd, who was the chief scribe of revelation and who was the Prophet during these last reviews. He said to him, you're a young man, and we have no accusation whatsoever against you, and you used to write revelation for the Prophet ﷺ. So go around and collect all those manuscripts, verify it, and put it in one place. What was the methodology used by Zayd and his committee? He's not the only one. It was public. Actually, it said that Umar went around and said, anyone who has manuscript, let them, bring it. Their methodology, in addition to memorization, and Zayd himself was a memorizer, was not to accept any claimed manuscript of the Quran unless there are 2 witnesses testifying to it. That's the minimum. In fact, some ulama interpret that in 3 ways. Some said means 2 witnesses that they have heard it with their own ears directly from the mouth of the Prophet ﷺ. Some said it means 2 witnesses who have seen that being written at the time the Prophet was dictating it. Others said, not necessarily, it could be 1 and 1. So at least there is 1 written manuscript, another testimony of a memorizers. There are even those who said it meant 4 because there is reference to writing, reference to memorizing, so that means actually 4. But suppose even we take the more conservative one, that there were 2 witnesses at least, whatever, writing and or memorization of every ayah in the Quran before it was accepted to be part of the collection. But like I said again, all these writings could have been useless so long as the memorization of the Quran is ascertained by multitudes of people around the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That original collection, you might say, it was not writing, and I'd like to clarify an issue here, that just coming to that, the question of compilation. That was nothing more than compilation, not writing. And some writers, unfortunately, try to confuse the reader by using terms and expression to the effect of giving the impression that the Quran was not written at the time of the Prophet, it was written at the time of Abu Bakr. This is totally incorrect. To compile something means to bring the already written manuscript, put it together, order it, and arrange it according to the order of the surahs, as the Prophet ﷺ explained to them. So this is an issue that has to be kept in mind. It was not writing, it was compiling. That copy remained in the custody of Abu Bakr as Khalifa. After his death, it went to Umar radiallahu anh, and after the death of Umar, it remained in the custody of Hafsa radiallahu anha, who was also a widow of the Prophet ﷺ, until, I will see later, it was borrowed by Uthman radiallahu anh for the copy, for verification of the copy that he sent all over the world. So that gives a sort of very brief summary. I'm leaving many details because, like I said, the topic could be very dry if you get too much branching on that. Now we move to Uthman's time. I try to again put it in some simplified form, but we'll add some more points as we go on. First of all, what was the occasion? We know that the occasion of Abu Bakr's effort was to make sure that at least in addition to memorizing, there is some authentic codex, as they call it, or written manuscript. How about Uthman? What was the occasion? I'll mention something here briefly, which is rather complex, but I just simplify it, and then, inshallah, towards the end of this time, I elaborate more. This is the notion of the so-called